morning. Hey, great to catch up again. And
Good to see you,
so
Nick.
yeah, no, it's a lot has happened since when we first spoke, and we're way down the path. So that'll be a good opportunity to reconnect again and bring you up to speed with where we are. And yeah, just lots has happened. So, um, I remember I remember when we first connected, your email was like, "Oh my God, I'm so waiting for someone to have done this, right? To actually build something like Deckable. The world has been waiting for this." So, and I never forget receiving your email back. That was like, "Yeah, someone who understands." That's really cool. So, basically, yeah, with Deckable, we're on this mission to basically democratize decks and put decks in the hands of so many more people. Because almost I feel like the people who use decks really understand them, but not everyone is using decks at this point. And kind of the way we see the kind of deck marketplace, there's all these different types of decks, right? But people don't necessarily even realize that these are all the same sort of product space, right? And so what we're trying to do is put all these decks into one app on your phone, which is a bit like, well, it's just like Audible for card decks. And I mean, I know you've categorized a lot of decks on Deckaholic, so covering some of these categories, right?
Yeah.
So, and then this is really the problem that we kind of see that we solve, is that if we did a survey and found that the average person who has decks has 10 or maybe more, 10 or 20 more decks. And so they basically have all these decks that they own and love, and want to use, but they don't take them with them all the time because they're expensive and they're bulky. And so the idea is with Deckable is we put put all the decks you love on the phone, so you can actually have them with you at any point in time. And it just makes sense because books and movies and music have all been done. We all know who won those, battles like Kindle, Audible, Spotify, etc. Right? And for people, I don't know if you know this, but my current estimate is there's 100,000 unique decks in the world, and that as numbers been going up as I've researched more and more. That's a lot of decks. There's actually, I found over nearly 30 people who offer courses on how to create card decks these days, which is pretty mind-blowing. But for all these people, the cost of printing those decks and the cost of shipping them, especially these days, has become really expensive. And it's also not so green, right? So the idea with Deckable is you put all these decks on your phone and you can download them instantly. And it just makes the use of this knowledge much more accessible. And so we were here about having some fun. So instead of got milk, it's got deck. Instead of 1,000, instead of that, there's an app for that. There's a deck for that. Instead of 1,000 songs in your pocket, 100 decks in your pocket. We're really just trying to have fun with the idea of the whole card deck marketplace. And there's just so many business decks available. I mean, I don't know how many decks do you have on Deckaholic now? Probably 100 and something.
Oh, yeah, I don't know, hundreds. And then I have a pile more that people have sent me that I still need to photograph and put up there.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I really just focus on decks for problem solving and more like organizational and business applications. And then there's, you go into like games and more kind of for fun. And there's a huge world of that too.
Right. And so, yeah, totally. And that's really the fascinating thing to me, is that I didn't even envisage this being a game platform, but we actually have quite a few games on here now. And it's just a way of playfully having that content available anytime. So you never lose a card. You can shuffle it. You can never forget which cards you drew on a particular day, right? It's just all there for you. So, one of the things that I've learned in this process is there's almost three types and this is ignoring even the business ideation stuff, is there's three types of decks that everyone should have. You should have a values deck to know what you valued, an emotions deck to express what you're feeling, and a strengths deck to know what your strengths and weaknesses are, and to surround yourself with a team who cover all of your weaknesses. And it is just, I bring up these examples because I have lots of friends that don't use any decks at all. And like I tell them about, Deckable, and they listen and look at me like kind of blankly. And this is a sort of really simple, it's like a gateway deck that introduces people to to the use of card decks, and ideation decks are another great example of that, right? So
yeah, that's a great point. Like if you ask me what decks I use the most just in my everyday
totally.
life, that it would be there's a values card deck that's different than this one that I love. And then I use one on, it's more for my business, but that are like leadership competencies, which is really similar to strength. So it's the ones I use a lot overlap with yours.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not actually advocating these specific decks, because there are like dozens or hundreds of decks in each of these categories, right? But it's just, I'm a big board gamer, and I always think about, I play a lot of Euro games, and we kind of talk about things like Settlers of Catan as like gateway games, like, Ticket to Ride as a way of teaching people to get into board games, and then people want to play other games because they had such a good time. And these are almost like gateway decks that introduce people to the concept, right? This week we passed 200 decks approved and published. Yeah, that was
Good job.
I am an eternal optimist, but holy moly, was this a steep hill to climb? And it's definitely got easier. And I have a deep appreciation of, I know literally hundreds of people now in the card deck industry. So it's fascinating. And these are some of our business decks that we have on Deckable, right? So, branding, storytelling, business questions, collaboration decks, the list just goes on. There's a deck for everything, right? And that to me is fascinating, because I keep thinking I found all the decks. And literally every week I find somebody new who has a big following and, 5-10 decks. I'm like, where have you been hiding? Like, and I've done a lot of research, right? So there's some amazing deck stuff. Have you seen the heart? I'll try and get Heidi to send you the Heart Space deck. It's a hexagonal deck. Absolutely stunning. It's one of my favorites.
Oh, cool. Oh, thank you.
We'll see that later. Yeah. So there's some great decks here. And then really what we're trying to do is help creatives make money from their decks, right? So there's so many business coaches who have these wonderful models that they create and they build into their deck. And then they're like, oh, I'm really good at creating models, but I'm not so good at marketing and reaching my deck across the world, right? And say you're in, so you're in Australia. There's an awful lot of shipping involved in shipping your decks around the world, wherever you are. Managing your Amazon stock and all that stuff is super challenging, and it doesn't end up being that profitable by the time you've paid for printing and shipping, etc. So digitally, there's more money to be made, and we've created an experience on the phone that's much more than just digitizing the deck, right? So this is what we've done. This is the cool bit, is we basically have a way of exploring all the different readings you've done, all the different decks. So let's have a look at that. And here I can scroll up and down on every day. I can have different readings from different decks, and any one of these I can click on and pinch and zoom in on, and I can flip the cards over and I can organize them really tactile. It feels like I've got a phone on I've actually got a card deck in my hands, because I'm touching the cards, right? And then once I pick the card, I can journal on that card, right? So I can just flip into journal mode and start typing, right? And I can type like that. And you see I'm typing badly. And now I can flip into talking to my phone. So now anyone who says I don't like to journal because I can't type, they kind of no more excuses. In the strategy sessions that you run, everyone in the group has got a mobile phone. They can download the deck and they can actually comment and journal and rank and make those business choices and put their justifications or preferences behind why they chose each thing, right? And so that's the journaling. And then also we have meditation. So you can set a meditation timer and it kind of bongs you in. And then here it's going to just count me down. 15 seconds is the shortest meditation you can do. And then when the meditation is complete, it's going to flip the card over and record that in my timeline. And then I basically got my journal entry that I meditated on Thursdays on this card at this time, right? And if I want to, I can then go and journal on that. So we've created this daily ritual of using card decks as a way of just reflecting, anchoring, setting, regrounding yourself. How do we do today? What was going on? Do we live to our values? What strengths are we having? All that kind of good stuff. So this was a bit of a surprise to us. Is one of the coolest things that people love to do with the card deck is just draw a card each day. And that's more of a spiritual affirmation thing, but there's also value in this in the business space too. And so literally you can pick a deck and pick 1, 2, or 3 cards. You get the cards at random from the deck. You can reflect on those, and then it saves those to your timeline. So it's really simple to get access to this information. And then digitally, it's kind of funny, but you can literally find the card quicker in a digital deck. Just type it in. What was that card? It had the word balloon on it. What was it? What was it about? I can't remember the name of it. And you can just remember from the text and find the card. Or you can filter. Just about every business deck is divided up into suits, right? There's these positive emotions, negative emotions, whatever you want. You can filter by those, and there you are. And then when you found the card, you can just share it with a friend, right? So makes it super accessible. And then this has come a long way. It's like, shuffling the cards is pretty cool. So you can shuffle the cards face up or face down. So that's really super simple. And then the cards aren't just two-sided. We don't have a two-sided limit. So this is a three-sided deck. So side 1, side 2, side 3, back to side 1. I can pick the cards, drop the cards onto the playing surface and move them around. And if I want to, at any point, I could just flip over all those cards, or I can pick an individual card and just flip it over. So I've really got that feel of the desktop and accessibility of having that card deck on my phone. And I think my favorite feature of all of kind of Deckable is the card sort, right? Which is, here's the thing, these are our options. How do we group them into yes, no, maybe? You can structure those cards. And because you can pinch and zoom them, you're not just dividing them into groups, you're also prioritizing them from large to small, right? So that's a really pretty complex survey that you just done there, but made it fun and tactile, right? So, and then all the different, you've made some videos along the way of categorizing the different ways in which people can sort cards, group them, organize them. Right? I think pretty much all of that is capable to be done inside Deckable. So it feels, and especially when, like, it can feel a bit small if you don't that, but if you got it on the tablet, right? It's pretty awesome that you've got that much space, and it runs beautifully on a tablet as well. And we've also added audio and video to the deck. So you can
card number 2.
So you can listen to the card. Or,
so I'll start with this.
Oops, I didn't do that. You can.
So I'll start with number 2.
You can watch the video, right? So it becomes a learning tool. So you can package up how people receive the information. You can have many sides to a card, and then just chunk the information and create a course as a deck. In fact, so it's kind of interesting. And then doesn't apply so much in the business domain, but a lot of tarot decks have this guidebook that you have to look up the information because there was too much to fit on the card. And so we don't have that problem because we can just have the third side or the fourth side. It's very easy to pull that information together. So it makes it super accessible. And we can also have all those extra cards that explain you how to use the deck or use it for this process or that. And it's all packaged up in the deck. And then, just super simple, we do deep sharing. So we share that you can pick the cards and then you pick a friend, and then the friend receives those like inside their inbox, inside Deckable, and they can play with those cards and then journal on them and send them back to you, right? So it's kind of super tactile and fun, but a way of people can collaborate and share opinions. So, and then, from once you've found the card, you're one click away from buying the card. So if we're helping people sell their deck, they can buy the deck digitally, or we can link them to their website to buy the physical deck, wherever that is in the world. They can then ship the deck from there. And I think the idea of helping people get the deck, fall in love with it, and then want the physical deck, because I don't know about you, but I love having my decks like out and about and spread around. So it's kind of, we're not suggesting for a second that we want to go solely digital. I think people will still want physical decks, absolutely. And this just means people can find the deck they want and then order it once they know it's the right deck for them. And then these are just some of the cool features. Is I mentioned that hexagonal.
Yeah,
deck.
you're telling me. Mm-hmm.
Isn't that pretty amazing? So then you just flip the card over, and and I can just organize them and group them. We also support circular decks. It's just any kind of shape, right? And this is when you're actually trying to coach with people and bring people out, it's getting people to engage and participate. And that's what this does wonderfully. Cards are a great way of getting people to, they forget their resistance because they get involved and start touching the cards, and then they start expressing themselves. And that's the whole, you know you're onto a successful coaching session when people are willingly participating and contributing, and they've forgotten what their resistance was to whatever it is you're working on. And so Deckable sort of facilitates that, because when you're pinching and zooming and making choices, it really takes you into the moment and you forget what your resistances were that were there. We also do photo objects. So the teddy bear is just a card. Like, you can literally create workplace scenarios and then create, storytelling for kids or storytelling for grown-ups in the workplace. Well, this is what happened. And this is how I saw that situation. And this is how I felt in that scenario, right? So it's an amazing tool set for coaching when you consider that all of these decks can be on your phone. And then there's lots of people using decks for games. So like Wash a Pig is a copywriting game, and you pick random cards from different categories, and then you're given a copywriting challenge. Tiny Library was a Kickstarter with 50 games in it, and you just it's like a library, right? It's much more fun than a PDF, but it's on your phone. And then there's an awful lot of decks with questions and journaling prompts in it, right? And then so you pick the cards, and then you can journal on it in Deckable. And then you saw the card sort before. This is just a simple example that we've actually converged doing spreads, which is a structured way of doing questioning, and then a card sort, which is a way of like prioritizing and ranking and getting there and making choices. So here's the values deck. I pick some values here, choose some cards into my selection and then when I've chosen the cards, I can drop them onto the playing surface, and I arrange the choices that I've made. And I can make them bigger and smaller. So I'm actually prioritizing what my values are. And you've expressed yourself without actually having, noticing that you've really been, it's much more fun than filling in a survey tool, basically. And then you can just share those choices with a friend or with your colleague or with the team. So, and then with a spread, you literally organize the cards in a different way. Each spread has different meaning, and you can create these spreads for the deck. And then basically lay out the cards and flip it over and get the meaning. And that's really it. The last piece is just the reminders and alerts. So that's kind of a whirlwind tour.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's come from when we first started talking about this to now. It's just amazing what you've done. And I feel like I'm super excited to explore it some more myself. But I just feel like you've built in a lot of functionality, and I'll be really curious to see, like, you've kind of built this sandbox, and I'm curious to see which parts of it get used the most. And like, I think you've like, I can tell you're really open to just seeing how users use it and experience it. And then that's going to inform the product. So I think you've done a great job launching with a lot of functionality.
And what's cool is if you don't have audio and video, you won't even see the audio video buttons, right? If you don't have spreads, you don't see them. So it's got this, it's been designed so it becomes progressive. When you want more, there's more, but it's not in your face, right? Since when we spoke, we've actually hired a new UX guy, and he's super into card decks. So it's really cool that we didn't have to teach him card decks. He actually he's from Portland, by the way. Isaac. Cool. So yeah, that's really evolved that notion of, and satisfying. Originally, we began to think that the tarot crowd and the kind of business coaching crowd were more separate, but they're really converging, wanting very specifically different things, but it's the same features. Like people are asking us some really advanced things in the spreads that they create, specifically in the coaching domain. And it's just amazing. If I listened to any one of them, I would be thinking, oh, you're asking for a really advanced thing that no one else is going to want. But I literally have 20 people asking for the same things. I'm like, okay, wow. I mean, that's amazing to get that validation. Otherwise, you'd be thinking, well, if I add these features, it really feels extreme and decadent and too much. But
Well, it's so cool. And I just think, I mean, so there's all of the ways of using it, but honestly, I feel like one of the biggest services that you're providing to the community is just a way of finding
Right.
content that's relevant to you, you know, and it's and in some ways it's leapfrogged what's even available in any sort of physical sense. I mean, like, you know, bookstores rarely have a card deck section, libraries rarely have a card deck section. So if you you know, you've found one or two that you really gravitate towards, and then you're looking for more, you know, like there's my website, Deckaholic, which I
Right.
started like 10 years ago, but it's not even, I mean, that's a niche on its own. And like you're already, I think, surpassing that with just being able to browse, like not just based on a description to find what's relevant to you and some photos, but like really being able to explore it and test out. And then,
Right.
I mean, I will probably always, like when I really fall in love with the deck, I'll want to buy the real thing. And I love that you've integrated that. But there's so many, I mean, there's so many card decks that people have sent me that I never would have bought because
Right.
I didn't really get it till I used it, and then I love it. And then there's other ones that I got that, like, once I read the content, I'm like, yeah, this is kind of crap. Like, this isn't very well done. Do you know what I mean? And something
Right.
like
Right.
like values, for example, I totally agree. Everyone should like do that reflection for themselves, what their values are. And there's lots of values card decks. So to be able
Absolutely.
to look at a few before you buy something is just like, it's never, that kind of market has just never been out there, because I think decks have been, people think of them as being so obscure, but they're not. They're
No,
everywhere.
exactly. And also doing that values exercise is anything but a one-off task, right? Like, I'm sure
Yeah.
you've experienced it, right? You've taught people to do a values exercise, and 3 months later, they're getting to the bottom of the truth of what their values really are, because they've done the exercise 10 times, they've been challenged with friends, they've had other people do it, and they're like, well, you know, this was higher up my tree before. When it's come down to it, the truth is this is what I value, right? And I think that's hard to explain, but I've never seen it fail. Right? That exercise, if someone starts doing a values thing, they have to do it again and again. And they're like a converted citizen by then. They're like bought into the decology of it all, right?
Yeah. Well, I feel like this is really well optimized for that, like self-exploration, and then like with a partner or a coach or a therapist, or like that back and forth. And you've described a little bit how you could do it kind of like a survey for a larger group. I do, when I'm facilitating, I use card decks a lot, facilitating like in person in the room. And you know, as things went more virtual facilitation with the pandemic, that's been a challenge, like how to use card decks in a group setting. And I've found all sorts of hacks to making that work. But yeah, I think it would be too much to try to take that on right now, like really optimizing something for a larger experience. But I can see your platform going that direction in the future.
And we totally have the idea of Deckable desktop in our crosshairs. You know, the way it's engineered, based on how we built it, we engineered it to know we were going to have a desktop offering. So and then once you have desktop, you start being able to gather information from, you know, 20, 50, 100 people who can all have their own deck and make their own choices, right? So so many things come possible from that. It's just almost mind-blowing. But like you said, get out the door with what's there. You've got this core set of features. And what shocked me is how some people are like, well, if it doesn't have this, it doesn't really fit for me, right? So people have some pretty advanced, people write down all these rules with their card deck, and people buy the deck and ignore the rules. But when they want to put them on Deckable, they're like, I want all this enforced. I'm like, oh, you know.
It was never enforced to begin with. Yeah. I mean, it's a two-sided piece of paper, you know.
Exactly,
so people are going to do what they're going to do.
it's an amazing conversation starting tool, right? I think that's the power of card decks, really. Somehow it takes people out of their whatever situation they're in, brings them into the moment, and lets them collaborate and share and learn together, right? So it's pretty exciting.
Well, cool, Nick. Thanks for the update. I feel like I'd be happy to share this with people who are still tracking what Deckaholic's been doing. And
Cool. Yeah, that'd be great. It's really cool to connect again. It was so like it's been a long 6 months, but we've made a lot of progress. So it's very exciting. Thank you for making time today, and look forward to catching up again and updating you where we've got to, and then seeing your first deck loaded on Deckable. Get you in there creating.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick.
All right. Thanks very much.